Mr. Jeffries.
Thank you, Chairman Nadler. Thank you, Director Wray, for your presence and your service to this country. The dramatic rise in anti-Semitic and anti-Asian violence throughout this country is unacceptable, unconscionable, and un-American. So let me begin, Director Wray, by just urging you and the FBI to dedicate all necessary resources to deal with and address this scourge. Director Wray, violent white supremacy is the most persistent and lethal threat to the American homeland, correct?
Well, the way we look at it, we've categorized it, I think we're saying the same thing, but just to be clear, we have elevated racially motivated violent extremism, the vast majority of which is motivated by advocacy on behalf of white superiority as at our highest threat priority level. That's commensurate with ISIS. And it is certainly true that over the last few years, the most lethal attacks here in the homeland have been by individuals of that racially motivated violent extremist category, specifically those advocating for the superiority of the white race.
Right, otherwise known as white supremacists. So the largest group, just to clarify, of racially motivated violent extremists are white supremacist organizations. Is that right?
Well, I wouldn't say organizations, but individuals. The largest portion of domestic terrorist investigations that we have, and arrests or investigations of the racially motivated.
No, thank you. Let me ask you about organizations. The Oath Keepers are a white supremacist organization, true?
I'm not sure that I can characterize their ideology. I would say that we have charged a number of individuals related to specific terrorist activity or violent activity, maybe is a better way of putting it, who self-identify with the Oath Keepers. And I think some of those individuals are ones that we would put in this racially motivated violent extremist category. We also have a number of such investigations of individuals who self-identify with the Proud Boys in a similar vein. But again, in each of those instances, we're not charging them for their membership in Oath Keepers or Proud Boys. We're charging them based on their violent criminal activity.
Understood. The FBI respects the First Amendment. So do we in Congress, and we can agree on that. You anticipated my next question. The Oath Keepers clearly are a white supremacist organization. That's my observation, not yours. But happy to have you join me in that characterization. Would you say that the neo-Nazis are a white supremacist organization?
Well, I certainly, when I use the term neo-Nazis, I think of them as people who are advocating for white supremacy. That's at least the way I think of that term.
Okay. I'm wondering, why is the FBI generally reluctant to use the term violent white supremacy?
I think we use the term racially motivated violent extremism partly because we're trying to make clear to our people and everyone who's involved that our focus, that doesn't mean everybody else's focus, but our focus is on the violence. And so part of the reason we changed some of our nomenclature was to make especially sure that what's important to us, and it gets back to this idea that we have one standard. It doesn't matter what your motivation is or how abhorrent or despicable your motivation is, what we have to be focused on is the violence.
I understand that the violence is largely being driven by white supremacy as an ideology. If you don't name the problem and claim the problem, it seems to me that it's hard to tame the problem. That's why I'm raising this particular issue. In terms of domestic terrorism, I think you've testified in the past that this is a growing problem that we've experienced in America, correct?
Domestic terrorism? Absolutely.
That's correct.
Yes.
And I would argue that it is actually a problem that has been with us for centuries. We know that the KKK was founded in 1865. That's a terrorist organization. We know that the lynchings that took place in the 1800s and the 1900s were acts of domestic terror. The murder, the brutal killing of Emmett Till in 1955, that was an act of domestic terror. The bombings of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, which took place in 1963, That was an act of domestic terror, killing 4 beautiful Black little girls. This most recent January 6th instance, the attack on the Capitol that resulted in death and mayhem, was an act of domestic terror. And the through line through all of those instances is white supremacy. I hope that the FBI will use all of its resources to tackle this persistent problem. I yield back.